Every year, poker players spend millions of dollars on coaching programs, strategy books, and video courses taught by people with credentials, tournament results, and large audiences. Most of those players are losing more money the year after purchasing that advice than they were before. The strategies are not working, and in most cases, the experts selling them either learned them in a different era of the game or never stress-tested them against the mathematical frameworks that govern modern poker. This is the breakdown of 7 pieces of advice that are circulating right now, presented as gospel, that are quietly draining your bankroll every time you follow them. Number 7. Always continuation. Bet the flop. This is the most universally taught piece of strategy advice in beginner poker education. The logic sounds clean. You raised pre-flop. You represented a strong hand. Now you bet the flop to take it down. Keep the pressure on. Never show weakness. A decade ago, at the stake levels where this advice was generated, it worked often enough to feel correct. The problem is that poker evolved, and this advice did not. Modern solver analysis, which uses game theory to calculate the mathematically optimal play across millions of simulated hands, has documented that the optimal continuation bet frequency in most situations is significantly lower than 100%. It varies by board texture, position, the range of hands your opponent is likely to hold, and the specific structure of the pre-flop action. On boards that connect well with hands your opponent would call a pre-flop raise with, betting 100% of your range is a documented leak. It bleeds chips across thousands of hands against any opponent paying attention to your patterns. The expert teaching you to always c-bet is teaching you a strategy that competent opponents actively exploit. They have already accounted for your automatic bet and are raising you off the pot with hands that have no business winning it. Stop paying for the privilege of being predictable. Number 6. Limp call with small pocket pairs to set mine. This advice is everywhere. You look down at 4s or 5s in early position, and the coaching says to call and see a flop. If you hit your set, you win a big pot. If you miss, you fold. Simple, controlled, safe. The math behind this strategy is real, but the conditions required to make it profitable are almost never discussed alongside it. For set mining to be profitable, the implied odds need to justify the call. That requires a stack depth of roughly 15 to 20 times the pre-flop investment, an opponent who will commit a significant portion of their stack when you do hit, and a pot structure where the money can flow to you efficiently. In practice, at the stake levels where most players receive this advice, those conditions are met far less often than the advice implies. You call, you miss the set approximately 7 out of 8 times, and the chips you invested across those 7 missed attempts are unrecoverable. The one set you hit does not always get paid. The opponent folds to your bet, or the board runs out badly, or the stack depths were never deep enough to generate the implied odds the strategy requires. Limp calling with small pairs is a profitable tool in specific, well-defined situations. It is not a default strategy for every table, every position, and every stack depth. The expert telling you otherwise is giving you a rule without the conditions that make the rule applicable. Number 5. Tighten up to survive the bubble. Tournament poker has a moment that every player dreads and every coach has an opinion on: the bubble. The point in a tournament where one more elimination means every remaining player cashes. The standard advice, repeated across virtually every introductory tournament strategy resource, is to tighten your range, avoid marginal situations, and let shorter stacks bust out around you. There is a version of this advice that is directionally correct, but it has been taken so far past its useful boundary that it has become one of the most exploited patterns in live tournament poker. When a large portion of the field is folding their way to a cash, the players who understand ICM pressure and continue applying aggression selectively are printing chips. Every time you fold a hand that should be played because you are terrified of the bubble, the aggressive player to your left adds your blind to their stack with zero resistance. They do it again, the next orbit, and the one after that. You survive the bubble with a stack too short to compete in the levels where the real money lives, and you bust out shortly after cashing for an amount that does not justify the hours you invested in the tournament. Tighten up on the bubble is advice built on fear management, not chip optimization. The players who win tournaments are not the ones who survive the bubble the most carefully. They are the ones who use the bubble to accumulate the chips that make deep runs possible. Number 4, slow play your big hands to trap opponents. Flopping a set, making a straight, hitting the full house. The conventional wisdom says you check, you play passive, you let the opponent build the pot for you, and then you spring the trap when they are already committed. It feels sophisticated. It feels like deception. It is costing you money at a documented rate. The mathematical problem with slow playing is that it requires a specific set of conditions to be more profitable than simply building the pot yourself. Your opponent needs to have a hand strong enough to commit chips to the pot on later streets. The board needs to not produce cards that counteract your hand or give your opponent a better one. And the action needs to develop in a way that generates the value you chose not to take immediately. When those conditions are absent, and they are absent far more often than the strategy assumes, you have given your opponent a free or discounted card that could cost you the pot, and you have taken less money from them when they were most likely to pay it. The players who run the highest win rates with big hands are not the ones who slow play the most creatively. They are the ones who build the pot at the earliest opportunity and extract the maximum amount of value from opponents before the hand is over. Number 3, play by instinct and feel, not by numbers. There is a school of thought in poker, championed loudly by some of the most decorated names in the game, that the highest level of play is not mathematical, but psychological. Read the player, trust your gut, feel the energy at the table, and respond to it. The numbers are for people who do not truly understand the game. This philosophy has been documented across books, instructional content, and public commentary by players with real championship credentials. The problem is that the modern game has stress-tested this framework at scale, and the results are not favorable to it. The professionals who have consistently demonstrated the highest long-run win rates in the modern era are not the ones operating on feel. They are the ones who have internalized the mathematical foundations of the game deeply enough that their instincts have been calibrated by those foundations rather than running independent of them. Feel matters, table reading matters. The problem is that when feel contradicts math and a credentialed expert has taught you to trust the feel, you are building your game on a foundation that will fail you systematically over a large sample of hands. The hands where your read was wrong and your math told you so are the ones you played incorrectly because the expert told you the math was the lesser discipline. Number 2, 3-bet or fold pre-flop, no calling. This piece of advice entered the strategy conversation as a correction to a real problem. Many players, particularly at lower stakes, called too often pre-flop and found themselves in bad spots post-flop with mediocre hands and no clear plan. The correction offered was to simplify the decision into a binary. If the hand is good enough to play, re-raise. If it is not, fold. Remove the call entirely from your pre-flop decision tree. In specific contexts and at specific positions on the table, this framework has merit. As a universal pre-flop policy, it creates a different problem. It makes your 3-betting range transparent and exploitable. If observant opponents know that every 3-bet from you represents a hand above a certain strength threshold, they can fold precisely the hands that lose to your range and continue with the ones that have equity against it. More importantly, it eliminates calling ranges that are mathematically profitable. There are hands that do not have the equity to re-raise profitably in certain situations, but do have the equity to call and realize their value post-flop. Folding those hands because the expert told you the call was a weak play is surrendering equity you were entitled to. The players beating high-stakes cash games and deep tournament fields are not operating with binary pre-flop decisions. They are playing mixed strategies across multiple action types based on position, stack depth, opponent tendencies, and range construction. The 3-bet or fold framework is a training wheel. Experts teaching it as a permanent policy are keeping you on training wheels past the point where you should have removed them. Number 1. Avoid bluffing at lower stakes because recreational players call too much. This is the most dangerous piece of advice on this list because it contains enough truth to feel completely correct. Recreational players at lower stakes do call more than they should. This is documented across every meaningful analysis of low-stakes poker player tendencies. The advice to reduce your bluffing frequency in that environment is directionally reasonable. The way it is being applied is actively harmful, because what the full version of this advice requires is a calibrated adjustment to your bluffing frequency based on the calling tendencies of specific opponents in specific situations. What players are hearing and applying instead is a wholesale elimination of bluffing from their game. They bet only when they have strong hands. They check or fold when they do not. They become the most exploitable type of poker player in existence. A player who bets only for value and never bluffs is giving every opponent at the table a free license to fold every time you bet. Your value hands get no action. Your checked hands are attacked immediately. Your entire range becomes legible. The expert teaching you not to bluff at low stakes is not describing a complete strategy. They are giving you a partial correction to a real problem and leaving out the context that makes the correction applicable. A poker player with no bluffing range is not a tight, disciplined, controlled player. They are an open book that anyone paying attention can read and exploit for as long as you remain at the table. The strategies on this list were not invented by people trying to hurt your game. Most of them contain a real insight buried underneath an oversimplification. The problem is that the poker community packages these partial truths into teachable rules and strips away the conditions, the context, and the mathematical foundations that determine when they apply. You follow the rule fails you, you blame variance. The expert sells the next course. Study the math, test the conditions, and before you apply any piece of strategy advice at the table, ask one question. Does this hold up when an opponent knows exactly what I am doing and adjusts accordingly? If the answer is no, the expert gave you a leak, and the table will find it before you do.